Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Blackmore. I'm one of the producers with the Spark Animation Festival. It's my pleasure to introduce you to another part of our Meet the Filmmakers series. Today, we're going to be examining Save Ralph. Now, the anti animal cruelty charity Humane Society International, HSI, has launched this film, Save Ralph, as a short film to spotlight the realities of animal testing. It was written and directed by Spencer Susser, our guest today, and created by the London-based stop-motion studio Archfilm Studio. The short film calls for an end to cosmetic testing on animals around the world. And with us, as we mentioned, we have Spencer Susser, and he's zooming in with us all the way from Sydney, Australia. Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, with Save Ralph, you've managed to take an extremely difficult message and yet make it lighthearted and influential. In fact, when we look at the global reception of your film, it's like no other. I mean, the social media, 50 million views on TikTok, 13.5 million views I saw today on YouTube. But there's a lot to unpack in that film. And I'm going to start with a few questions. First, let's start with, like with every film starts with a script. Why did you feel the need to write this story?
Well, first of all, I stopped eating animals about 8 years ago. And I guess when I made the connection between harming animals and eating them and using them for other things, it becomes something you're passionate about. And, you know, I think I did what I could do, which was stopping eating them, which I thought, and stop wearing them. But I wanted to do more. I've wanted to do more for a long time. I just didn't have an opportunity. And so when I heard that HSI was looking for concepts for a new campaign, I thought this would be the perfect thing. And I think part of it is in the past, when I've seen these animals that are being tested on and just such horrible graphic photos that it's such a turnoff, like it's so hard to look at. The typical reaction is to look away. And so I guess I wanted to do something that delivered the message, but sort of was engaging in a way that allowed you to kind of hear what was going on. And I thought there was no better way than to have one of the animals tell you himself.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting in this film is that two things I noticed. It's documentary style and stop motion. And this is really interesting formats to tell your story. First off, why did you choose documentary style?
Well, I wanted it to feel sort of off the cuff, and kind of captured, which again, it's kind of funny because that's a tricky thing to do with stop motion because stop motion is so specific. So I thought that was a fun challenge to try and make it feel kind of captured. Um, and then, stop motion is such, like bringing an animal to life, bringing a fantasy to life is, there's no better way in my mind than with stop motion. And I started to experiment with some stop motion stuff in the past, and I just fell in love with the process. Um, it's very slow, but it's also, in a way, it's like the ultimate control as a filmmaker, because you literally get to direct every frame, so it's really fun to tell a story in that world.
Because you're known as a live action director with lots of Hollywood films, so it's interesting that you chose this animation format. You mentioned that you've done it before. Were there challenges in doing it in stop motion?
Well, it's just challenging as a medium, because it is so time consuming. Um, so yeah, definitely. But, as I think the beauty of animation and in general is because it's so taxing and time consuming, you typically really want to work out what you're saying and how you're, telling your story. So there's a lot of homework that goes into it before you shoot a frame. And my background is editing. So the way I started directing was I always started from the editing chair. So I always previs before I even knew the term previs, I always started to do it. I always wanted to work it out before I shot anything. And the thing is with live action, you previs, you previs, and then you get there and everything changes. And then your job becomes about how do you pivot and capitalize on bad weather, bad light, an actor that does something different from how you imagine. The beauty of animation is you plan it and then you execute what you planned. And for the most part, you get to do what's in your head. And so that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, awesome. So you worked with London-based studio Archfilm. What was their design team's approach to developing? I mean, you have a script, but then they have to design the characters and the set. What was their work like for them?
Well, so Andy Gent is just this wonderful human and incredibly talented puppet maker, world builder. And they've made some just fantastic films in the past. And, I felt so lucky to get to work with Andy. And it started with the script. And, he really liked the script and the cause. And, originally we just started talking about the puppet. Originally he was going to create the puppet and we were going to shoot in LA, where I was at the time. And then obviously, the world changed. And luckily Andy was willing to take it on even more and build the sets and we got to shoot it there. But the process with Andy was, it was fantastic. I mean, we talked a lot, just about obviously there were many steps. The first step is creating the puppet, creating Ralph, creating the world. And then of course you have the production and the animation. We had, again, just an incredible team. Tobias Foraker was the animator who animated every frame of this, which is unusual on something this long. You usually have a team of animators. And I think for him, it was also, I think he really enjoyed the fact that every frame he got to breathe life into. And so that was a separate process from Andy, which was also fantastic. I could tell you about that. And then we had Tristan Oliver, who was the DP, who is also an amazing talent, who was really fantastic to work with. So that we had all these sort of different steps.
It sounds sorry for interrupting, but it sounds like you had a very committed crew because of the message, because of the script that you had and the message you were wanting to present. They got behind it 100%.
They did, and because like Andy has a huge team of talented model makers, and but aside from building the world and the puppet, then it got very small. It was, we would light it. Tristan and I would talk about it and lock in the look, and then everyone would kind of disappear, and it would be me and Tobias for days upon days upon days upon days. But what a great way to collaborate. Two people, just really building this, bringing this thing to life. Again, you can't do it without a whole bunch of people that got us to a place, but once you're sort of there,
Right.
you're just making a film. And I think with live action, that would be the dream, but it's just not possible. It takes too many people to move that machine. But I always think you need a camera, an actor, some lights, and a boom basically, and then you could go and figure it out and play around. But production doesn't work like that. It's like you got an hour.
Yeah, right. Good lighting. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you want to be an animation director now. You have more control.
Well, it's funny when I remember the time when Zemeckis made what was it? Polar.
Yeah.
Oh, he made a few.
Yeah. Yeah. He did the one with Tom Hanks, Polar Express.
Polar Express. I remember at the time thinking, I wonder why he did that. And then obviously then it clicked. It's like, oh, well, you just plan exactly what's in your head and then you execute exactly that. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that?
Right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. What I love, and I'm so glad that you chose the medium of stop motion. I love that as animation because I think what made it so different from live, say shooting in live action, the choice you could have had made was that you have this soft, fluffy, like a plushy Ralph, and yet there's that juxtaposition between the soft, fluffy Ralph and he's exposed to this cruelty, and it's startling. It's an uncomfortable film for that reason because we have this cuteness with this strong, cruel message that we're hitting. Can you speak of
Yeah,
that?
I think I like juxtaposition in film and things that sort of don't feel like they go together. And you really want the audience to lean in. I was hoping the audience would want to shake Ralph and say, "What's wrong with you, guy? Like,
Yeah.
this is not okay." And he's just a happy-go-lucky guy. Like, this is his life, this is his purpose, and he accepts it. He knows it's wrong. He's not happy, he's sad, but this is his job. And it's our responsibility to say, well, no, that's not okay. And the fact is, we, the audience, can change that. And so again, it's trying to sort of deliver the message in a way that gets you involved, that gets you invested.
Well, that's it. I mean, you're engaged right away with Ralph. I love his story, and then you realize where it's going, and I'm already committed, invested, as you said. And it's like, whoa! All of a sudden, there's a shift in my emotions, and the dark humor, that cuteness that's there, and there's that such a strong emotional message. And now it's like, oh my goodness, that's a tough. It's tough, but it's awesome because it's very few films that can hit it on all those points. That can do that. So
Well,
great.
I think good storytelling does that. It invites you in and gets you invested, and then hits you over the head, and you want to know what happens.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was definitely by design, the sort of misdirection. Come in, it'll be nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Meet this cute little bunny. He's funny,
Cruel,
isn't
cruel. Oh yeah. Now, and how did you get that all-star cast? I mean, your Rolodex is huge. You must be able to reach in and these
he?
guys. How did you bring in these
Well,
guys?
it's
Talk about
not
some of the
that
voices
big.
you have.
It's not that big, but I certainly had some talented people in there. And because the project was so small,
Mhm.
like, my feeling was I had to reach out to people that I knew, like, let me just start there. Because although I do feel like a lot of really talented people would want to get behind the cause, by the time you go through the agents and the this and the that, and it just becomes tricky. So the first person I called was Taika, who is just, an incredibly talented human and actor and director. And we had worked together on, we actually met at Sundance. We both had films there. And yeah, we just had been friends for a while. We worked on a couple of things together, supporting each other, a project he had a while ago. And then we made a short film together. Um, anyway, and then it just made sense, and I called him, and he was totally up for it. The problem is he's the busiest guy I know. He's like, at the time he was in the middle of writing the next Star Wars film, and a couple weeks out from starting production on his second Thor movie. Yeah, finally we found quite a short amount of, I think we had an hour, and we just kind of raced through it. And yeah, but and then once I had that, it was really fun to build on. I had done all my prep and previs before. I used another friend's voice who ended up, actually, she's one of the rabbits in the lab. um, um, Live, and she anyway, so that's, I recorded her, built
Yeah.
the whole thing, pre-visited, and yeah, anyway, and then it was just sort of a process of calling people and saying, hey, and
Like
it
Ricky
also, once,
Gervais. You got Ricky there. Ricky
yeah,
Gervais as
Ricky,
the
I mean,
interview.
I like, he's also everything you would hope and want him to be. He's so funny, he's so smart, he's so kind, and he really cares about the animals.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ricky
And he's
was someone.
like I say, he's very articulate in his interviews, and yeah, very committed. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he was just like he was someone who I didn't know before, but by the time he came on, I had shot a lot of it, so I was able to send him what I was doing, and without hesitation, he just jumped in. And again, he was just so much fun to work with, and he brought so much. He doesn't have a lot to do in the film, but his personality and his voice and he really brings the character to life. But yeah, it was really just kind of a dream working with him.
But see that point too. I mean, getting the message out when you have that kind of weight behind it, those two heavyweights. Oh, more than that, you had those are just two of the names that you had involved. You had several others. That helps push that message as well. And for a short little PSA, having that all-star cast and working on that, I think that helps it get that message out, as I say. So
Yeah, I think it really was. I always start with like, how do we make the best film?
right,
And so you put the most talented people you can put on it. Um, crew, cast, all of it, and then you go from there. But yeah, it certainly is a bonus when they have such a great reach because it exposes it to so many people. So yeah, that's a real bonus. But it's also nice when they really believe in the cause. You don't have to sort of promote it in a way where they want to share
yeah.
it.
No, that's the point. The message is most important. It's not the people behind it. It's the message. That's what stands on its own. And I think that's what the contrast with this message, this particular public service announcement, over other ones that HI have done, or pardon me, HSI, or other institutes, because they might have shown something that's live action, very graphic. But this draws us in a way, as we mentioned, that's super cute, using dark humor, and yet engages us and hits us over the head. Not, I should say over the head, but it nails us in the heart, really,
Yeah, it
and
makes
delivers that message acutely, acutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I think I have to
Well
give
done.
them a lot of credit for sort of taking my lead, because I think they were scared. Like, I think they weren't sure. I'm kind of this crazy guy with this idea that is pretty different from anything they've done.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, yeah, and I don't know if I was able to articulate what was in my head as much as I could show them. Let me make this thing and I'll show you. And I think, I think I was able to obviously convince them, but I definitely felt a lot of like, uh, this could
Yeah.
be a disaster. But they were very hands off in that way and sort of supportive, like, let me do my thing. So that was quite really,
Yeah.
I mean, that's also unusual.
And so COVID affected it, and you ended up working just in London. It took a
Yeah.
year to produce, but it felt like so compressed, and probably in those situations that was quite unusual too. How did it affect the crew and you?
Well, so again, when I started, I was in LA. And when it finished halfway through, I relocated to Australia. Um, and all that time, around that time, we started shooting in London. So I did it all via Zoom, which seemed like that would be a negative, like, how is this going to work? But in the end, it was actually fantastic. Because like I said, when we were shooting, it was Tobias and I, and my day would start at, like, when I was in LA, it would start about midnight, and I'd work till 4 or 5 in the morning, which worked out, for the daytime in London. And then when I got to Australia, I was in Western Australia. It was like about, I don't know, 8 or 9 p.m., something like that. So it worked. Yeah, I'm also a night person, so it worked well. But the nice thing was, like how you and I are talking,
Yeah.
we're face to face, and you really can, obviously you do that on a crew, but on a set, there's a lot going on, and there's just something great about the sort of intimacy of this. And you know, with Tobias and I, like, for example, we'd look at, you know, each moment, we talk about each moment for performance and movement. And, you know, I would act it out and then he would act it back. And it's funny because we're both bad actors. So it was like bad acting to each other, you know, until we were communicating specifically what we wanted. And then, you know, and then he'd do it and we'd look at it and talk about it. And it was just, it was so immediate, you know,
Right.
where I think when you're there, you talk about other things. I mean, we talked about a lot of things. We were kind of essentially hanging out and making this thing and having fun, but there was an unusual immediacy in making it via Zoom, which I hadn't experienced before or expected.
Interesting.
So that was kind of exciting in a way. And
How
also,
did,
you know, the time difference was kind of nice because, you know, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd get to think about, you know, the next, you know, 4 seconds on a good day, you know, we do 4 seconds, something like that.
yeah.
Sometimes you don't, you do a lot less depending on what the action is.
Well, some of those sets, I mean, they're crowded. They look like Ralph's home looks very lived in, and that I love how they designed the set. What was the name? His name Gint
Andy Gent.
and Andy Gant. Pardon me, Andy Gant.
Yeah.
And yeah, what he designed there. I think he was the one that designed those sets.
Yeah,
But
well, the thing with the original sort of, it was funny because like for the bathroom, for example, because what I actually did was I made 3D renders of the sets that I had in mind, and I sent those to Andy, which he then constructed out of cardboard, you know, and then we'd sort of look at those and readjust. And in Photoshop, I would, you know, paint them or try different things. And, you know, I pulled a lot of references. Andy and I looked at tons and tons of stuff. So we had a real sort of vocabulary of the world and the textures. And, but I had made my design for the bathroom was this skinny bathroom where Ralph's in front of the mirror. The thing is, it's, you know, when you're animating, you have to get in there. And Tobias, who has so much experience and has done so much, had never animated a character in a mirror, you know, because normally you get right in front of the character.
right.
And so it was a whole new challenge trying to figure that out. And just the idea of going behind him and adjusting his face in the reflection, which is backwards, is very, you know, it's like drawing with your left hand. So, and, you know, it's not, you can't really remove the wall and get in there and then put the wall back because the registration is, it's going to be very hard to get that to line up perfectly every time. So if you have some, you know, wobble, again, it's just a whole new challenge. So trying to figure that out was a whole thing. And, you know, I shot a bunch of tests. We spoke a lot about different ways to do it. At one point, you know, I was going to do it with, you know, Ralph basically shoot his reflection separately, you know, camera straight in front, like the reflection of the mirror, and comp that in. But again, it just, everything made it more and more complicated. And the solution that Andy and Tobias came up with was quite good. But, and Tristan, but the, you know, the mirror is not perfectly straight, so it's at a slight angle. And the set just ends like literally right on the frame. So he was able to get in there enough to, but again, what a challenge. And that's a detailed performance in the mirror.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, talking to himself.
And then the other thing that we had, which was also a whole different challenge that you wouldn't expect, that was the first scene we started with, the bathroom. And there was a heat wave in London. But so basically every day that they would come back, the heat would warp the mirror. So all of a sudden the mirror jumps, you know, and then, you know, it takes so long. By the time that scene was finished, it was very cold. So it was doing the opposite. So that was quite a thing, you know, and it's just one of those things that you deal with.
The physical
But
challenges.
unexpected, you know, it's not, you know, again, Andy like is so experienced. He's seen it all. He's done it all. The mirror wasn't, you know, it was like mounted to the strongest, you know, I don't know. It just one of those things. It just happened, and so yeah. So we dealt with it, and You know, and another just great thing about working with Andy is he's such a good person, and like he's like a film lover, you know, like he
Yeah,
loves his job, you know, and I think everyone who worked on it is the same, and that's fun because it's always like, how do we make this better? You know, I'm often asking. I think part of the job as a director to keep asking for, you know, can we do this? Like, here's this other thing I thought of,
right.
and figuring out how to sort of move things around to get the best version. But anytime I had a crazy idea, you know, like Andy would just go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yes, we'll figure it out. You know, like not, it was never about our resources or time, or if it's a good idea, we're going to figure it out. And so
Very,
it's really nice to work with people like that. I mean, it's such a privilege
yeah, that's awesome. So, and
and fun, you know, just like the shoot was really fun, you know, really time consuming, taxing, but just pure joy.
that's awesome. Something you never experienced in other productions?
I know you experience it in different ways. You know, it's
Yeah,
like production is often, you know, you feel the pressure of time.
yeah,
And so you're always sort of juggling that. I mean, at least I haven't got to the point where I can, you know, have a 10-minute conversation or a 30-minute conversation about the blocking. It's sort of like you got to come in pretty quick with a clear idea and maneuver very quickly. And it's a very different thing, you know, like it's a different muscle.
yeah,
And and I think the other thing I love about film, stop motion versus live action, um, everything applies. You know, the more you do that, the better you are at that. The more you do that, the more this makes sense. And
absolutely right.
and that's the job as a filmmaker, is to sort of be good at all those things. And the best filmmakers are still learning.
That's right. And the best filmmakers are using all the tools, right? And I think of, let's say, Chris Nolan or someone that doesn't just do all things with green screen or just with digital effects, but they know when to use practical effects. So similarly with yourself, right? There's a place and a time and a place when we use those different tools. And
Yeah,
it's all to me, it's all about visual storytelling and how we use this medium to tell our story. That's what it comes down to.
it's interesting you bring up Christopher Nolan and you know, practical effects, because that was another sort of thing with Ralph. You know, like we could have done computer animation. Why not?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, my feeling is it lacks. I love computer animation. I love CG stuff. I mean, but it's different, you know, like especially this, I don't know, it's not the soul, but there's something that you get from tactile, physical things. It's real. Like Ralph exists, you know, and E.T. is another example, you know, one of my all-time favorites. But you believe it, like I mean, you believe it because he's real, you know, he is a physical thing.
yeah.
And that goes so far with film, and even, you know, in the Dark Crystal and all the Jim Henson, like, you know, they're puppets, but you believe they exist because they do, and you can really empathize and feel for them in a slightly different way than with CG.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with you. That's so well put too. When we look at the message and the film that you're doing, this is such an important message for the world, really. Do you have any specific stories on how Save Ralph is affecting this cosmetic trade and what's happening?
Well, I mean, it's been really great how well received it's been, and how people really have gotten behind it and heard the message and signed a petition. You know, like it's really hard to get people to click a button, believe it or not. But a lot of people did. And because of it, there has been positive change in the world. Just recently, they changed the law in Mexico, outlawing testing on animals, which is, you know, that's the first country in North America to outlaw, to ban this horrible practice. And that's huge. I mean, that's that's something that, you know, I'll always be proud of. And in a way, it's also just as a filmmaker, what excites me beyond sort of helping the animals, because that's number one. But I love that it's because of film, like that storytelling can do that.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's like film is affecting change, and that you're using the medium that you can use best to do that. And I love seeing more examples like this. I mean, we love film to entertain us, but when it inspires us and motivates us to action, that's something altogether different. And that's very seldom seen, where we see it with Ralph, Save Ralph. You know, this is shows the power of the story and the medium to do that, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, same. And you know, the great thing about films is they entertain us. But the great ones also often are examples of how to live. You know, they can be.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we're facing so many challenges today, not just for the animals and that, and we think of our own, like you say, our treatment of coexisting with animals on the earth, but global warming and other problems that we see. And there's a need for more of these stories to affect change. And I'm glad that you, as a filmmaker, are doing that. It's awesome that you're doing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. To, you know, you don't always achieve it, but I think if you try, you know, that's the key. And you know, I think most people are good. You know, like most people want to be good and do the right thing, and you know, and so I think when you can communicate to them, most people will do the right thing and be compassionate, and you know, and help make the world a better place. But we're also lazy, you know, and maybe we like certain things, and maybe we like the way you know, a cow tastes, or whatever it is. You know, it's there's a reason, you know, a lot of people don't want to look at the reality of even, you know, the meat and the dairy industry. It's
Yeah.
but when you think about, you know, is a life worth the taste of one meal, you start to hopefully think about things differently. I mean, but it's hard, and you live your whole life thinking that eating meat is normal, and you know, um, not to get too heavy, but you know, with dairy, it's like, is it right to rape the cows and take their babies away so that humans can drink their milk, and you know, have them be on a machine their entire life and then kill them so you can eat them? I mean, it's like horrendous, the thought of it, to go, well, no, I just like a bit of milk in my coffee.
Yeah.
So I think when you start to look at things like that, it's hard to deny. I mean, but we do it all the time. You know, people are very, very good at it. I just, you know,
Well,
um,
you might not be changing the world, but you're at least getting everybody talking and discussing it and thinking about it. And that's just
well, I
as
think
important.
you just got to start somewhere, because you know, by
Exactly.
design, we don't think about these things. When you go
That's
and
right.
you buy cosmetics, you go, oh, this is a great color. You just don't even think about the fact that, um, and you know, the other thing that's crazy about the testing cosmetics on animals is it's not, there are actually better ways. There are better ways that are safer for us, that are more efficient. And it's this outdated practice that they just do because that's how things are done.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense. And I think the other thing that Ralph illustrated for me was that a lot of people just were unaware. I didn't know that. I didn't even think that, like, did they really do that? Well, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone is for it.
Yeah. No,
So
well, your film Save Ralph really serves as a great example on how we can use stories that can influence humanity and improve all of us collectively. So we really thank you for joining us today, Spencer. It's been awesome talking with you.
likewise, yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing the film at the festival and continuing to get it out there.
Yeah. Congratulations on it. It's been great.
Thank you.